The widowed millionaire's twin children were experiencing severe sleep difficulties until the new black nanny introduced a method that fundamentally altered their routine. That female is administering narcotics to the children, Gloria, the household manager, accused, her voice reverberating through the elegant main hall of the Whitmore estate with the force of a gunshot. Mr. James, it is implausible that two young ones who were restless throughout the entire night are now slumbering peacefully like divine beings. She is performing an unlawful act upon those infants. Kesha Williams, merely 28 years of age, stood without movement at the center of the polished marble corridor, observing the 60-year-old housekeeper gesticulating theatrically before her employer. The allegations did not catch her by surprise. In fact, she had anticipated this precise moment 3 weeks earlier when she consented to care for the 4-year-old twins who had caused previous nannies to depart in distress for 6 continuous months. James Whitmore, a property magnate and deeply sorrowful widower, shifted his gaze between his 15-year-serving housekeeper and the youthful black nanny who had transformed his residence from a place of incessant shrieking into a haven of tranquility. For the initial time since his wife's demise, his daughters, Ruby and Rose, achieved 8 uninterrupted hours of sleep each evening. "Gloria, those are exceedingly serious assertions," he whispered, evidently uneasy with the circumstances. "Serious, Mr. James. This individual arrived here from the outlying areas of Detroit possessing no legitimate professional references." Gloria articulated the words with a venomous tone. "And suddenly our girls, who previously screamed due to nightmares every night, now sleep like newborns. Something is profoundly amiss." Kesha drew a deep inhalation, her eyes briefly connecting with James's. There was a particular quality in that glance. It was not merely an acknowledgement of the calm she had brought to the household, but a genuine curiosity regarding her true identity. Why would a woman with her refined academic background and impressive comprehension of child development undertake a position that compelled other nannies to depart in tears? "If you insist on examining my methodologies," Kesha stated with a composure that caused Gloria to hesitate momentarily, "I propose we install video recording devices in the girls' sleeping quarters. That way, everyone can plainly witness precisely what transpires during the nocturnal hours." The suggestion took everyone by surprise. A culpable individual would never solicit additional oversight. James furrowed his brow, scrutinizing the nanny's serene countenance. There was a distinct characteristic about her bearing, an unwavering self-assurance that did not align with a mere child caregiver. Over the course of the recent days, he had discerned peculiar particulars. Kesha communicated fluently in 3 different languages, quoted academic studies in child neuroscience with scholarly exactness, and possessed a demeanor that compelled even significant visitors to respect her insights concerning the children. 3 weeks prior, when the employment agency had contacted him to offer her services, he had been in a state of desperation. 6 nannies had resigned in less than 2 months. Ruby and Rose, having been traumatized by their mother's abrupt passing in a vehicular mishap, spent their nights screaming, weeping, and resisting slumber. The entire household was in a condition of utter exhaustion. Gloria had consistently articulated her conviction regarding such individuals attending to the offspring of respectable families. However, when Kesha made her arrival on that initial afternoon, an immediate transformation took place. The twin girls, typically hostile towards unfamiliar persons, approached her with curiosity and, that very first night, a marvel occurred. They slept for 6 uninterrupted hours. "Cameras," Gloria stammered, clearly not anticipating that reply. "Well, that is not essential if she just—" "Actually," Kesha interjected, extracting her mobile phone from her pocket, "I have already documented portions of our nighttime rituals to chronicle the girls' advancements. Would you like to view them?" An absolute hush descended. James perceived a subtle alteration in Gloria's facial expression, transitioning from defiance to something approaching outright panic. There, in the very core of that grand hall where generations of privileged families had rendered judgments regarding the destinies of their domestic staff, Kesha stood resolute, guarding confidential information too potent to be revealed before the appropriate time. Should this narrative of bias masked as apprehension resonate with you, remember to subscribe to the channel because what unfolded next would unequivocally demonstrate that underestimating individuals based on their external characteristics can prove to be the most profound miscalculation of one's existence. Gloria harbored no desire to retreat. Throughout her 15 years of service to the Whitmore family, she had cultivated a reputation for unquestionable allegiance, and she would not permit an opportunist to dismantle her advantageous standing within the residence. "Mr. James, you are required to comprehend what is transpiring here," she pressed, moving towards the window that overlooked the garden where Ruby and Rose were engaging in recreational activity for the first time in several months. "This female appears from nowhere with no suitable credentials from reputable households, and then, all at once, she possesses extraordinary abilities with children. I urge you." James observed his daughters freely traversing the verdant expanse, their joyful sounds echoing for the initial time since their mother's funeral service. It was impossible to refute the profound transformation. They were consuming meals consistently, slumbering for 8 hours nightly, and had even returned to preschool without experiencing episodes of panic. "Gloria, perhaps you are overstating the gravity of the situation. The girls are being manipulated," the housekeeper interjected, her vocal tone elevating by an octave. "And you fail to perceive it because you are desperately seeking a resolution. But I am familiar with her kind. They present themselves as unassuming, perform transient wonders, and then commence demanding special dispensations. Initially, requests for increases in remuneration, then costly presents for her family, followed by access to your financial accounts." Kesha remained immobile, observing Gloria's theatrical exhibition with an undisturbed countenance that merely exasperated the housekeeper further. In reality, that specific reaction was precisely what she had anticipated from the very first day. 3 weeks prior, upon disembarking from the public bus at the thoroughfare near the Whitmore estate, Kesha was fully cognizant of the predicament she was entering. Having grown up in Detroit, the offspring of a cleaning woman who was employed by affluent families, she had witnessed this identical dynamic on countless occasions. Long-established employees safeguarding their territory against new arrivals, especially when those new arrivals did not conform to the preferred demographic. What Gloria was unaware of was that Kesha Williams possessed an advanced academic qualification in child psychology from the University of Michigan, had served as a consultant for pediatric trauma at 3 medical facilities, and had chosen this particular employment for exceptionally precise motivations that bore no relation to monetary gain. "Do you realize what irritates me most?" Gloria continued, now visibly losing her self-control. "It is her composure. A typical female would exhibit nervousness when accused of administering drugs to children. But observe her. She stands there as if she possesses information that we do not." James furrowed his brow. He was compelled to concede that Gloria's observation held some degree of merit. Kesha did indeed display an almost unsettling degree of self-assurance, akin to someone who was 3 stages ahead of everyone else. "Actually," Kesha stated softly, "I do possess knowledge that you do not." The quietude was profound. Gloria became slightly pale, as though she had just invoked something she was not prepared to confront. "I am aware that Ruby awakens at 2:30 in the morning because she experiences dreams of plummeting, precisely as her mother did when the vehicle overturned," Kesha proceeded, her vocal tone maintaining its composure. "I also know that Rose is unable to achieve slumber until she verifies that all entryways are securely fastened, because within her subconscious mind, the dwelling no longer feels secure since her mother departed and did not return." James experienced a sensation of coldness traversing his spinal column. How was she privy to such precise particulars regarding his daughter's nocturnal distresses? He had never disclosed to anyone about the unfortunate incident, nor about the manner in which Amanda's remains were discovered. "I also know," Kesha persisted, now directing her gaze squarely at Gloria, "that you have been informing the other child care providers in the vicinity that this household requires someone of an equivalent social standing to attend to the girls. Quite intriguing communications within the elite domestic professionals WhatsApp group, are they not?" Gloria's complexion shifted from pallid to crimson in a matter of mere seconds. "How did you?" "I never." Oh, but you certainly did. You even suggested that I was probably here to exploit the solitary widower. That constitutes a direct verbatim citation from your textual exchanges last Thursday. James slowly rotated towards Gloria, an expression of incredulity materializing upon his countenance. Is this accurate? The housekeeper stammered, unmistakably overcome by panic. How did this female individual gain access to his confidential communications? And why did she appear to comprehend precisely which sensitive points to address? Kesha remained composed, yet her gaze conveyed a quality that Gloria at last identified as peril. Here stood a female who not only possessed knowledge of his concealed facts but had arrived fully prepared for this exact confrontation. The truth, Mr. Whitmore, is that I accepted this employment because your family requires considerably more than merely a nanny. And Gloria, she smiled softly, has been actively obstructing any genuine advancement within this residence for a duration far exceeding your awareness. For the initial instance since his acquaintance with the housekeeper, James discerned genuine apprehension within her ocular expressions. And for the initial time since he had engaged Kesha's services, he began to suspect that this quiet woman held far greater depth than was superficially apparent. Each charge leveled by Gloria only appeared to fortify an intrinsic quality within Kesha, a silent power that expanded directly in proportion to the unfairness being attempted to be imposed upon her, as if every act of disdain was nourishing a scheme far grander than anyone present could possibly conceive. Do you desire to ascertain the veracity of what is occurring within this dwelling? Kesha inquired, her vocal inflection retaining that composed demeanor which was commencing to disquiet even James himself. Then let us commence from the absolute origin. She proceeded towards the auxiliary table and retrieved a leather portfolio that James had never observed previously. Gloria, are you certain you wish to persist with these allegations? For once I unveil the contents of this folder, there will be no possibility of reversal. The terror in the housekeeper's gaze was now almost physically tangible. Mr. James, she is attempting to coerce us. This is precisely the sort of manipulative conduct I was referring to. But James observed, captivated by the metamorphosis unfolding before his perception. The woman he had employed as a childcare provider was disclosing levels of intricacy that utterly defied his preconceptions. Kesha was not merely courteous, she was also calculating. She was not solely proficient, she was also formidable. 3 weeks ago, when I agreed to undertake this employment, Kesha proceeded, opening the portfolio, it was not because I urgently required a position. It was because I received a highly compelling telephone communication from an individual you are well acquainted with. She retrieved an auditory recording from her cellular device. Dr. Patricia Coleman, the pediatric physician who has been attending to Ruby and Rose for a duration of 2 years. She reached out to me after Gloria telephoned to challenge my professional capability even before I had commenced my tenure here. James experienced a wave of coldness cascading down his spinal column. Gloria, you contacted the girl's child specialist? I merely desired to ascertain if she was familiar with this individual, Gloria stammered, comprehending that she had stumbled into a stratagem whose existence she had not even suspected. Kesha initiated the playback. Dr. Coleman's distinct vocalization reverberated through the chamber. Gloria, I must inform you of something. Kesha Williams is not merely a conventional nanny. She possesses a master's degree in child psychology and specializes in cases of pediatric trauma. When I learned she had consented to oversee the Whitmore twin siblings, I was captivated. A specialist of her esteemed caliber does not undertake household duties due to financial exigency. The subsequent quietude was interrupted exclusively by the subdued sounds of youngsters engaged in play within the garden area. James regarded Kesha as though perceiving her for the very first time. You possess a postgraduate degree? From the University of Michigan. I was employed at Detroit Children's Hospital for a period of 5 years prior to establishing my independent clinic focusing on child trauma. Kesha gently smiled. The inquiry, Mr. Whitmore, is why would a psychological expert specializing in trauma care discontinue the operation of a prosperous clinic to be employed as a child care provider? Gloria was now unmistakably in a state of alarm. That lacks logical coherence. If you are so immensely credentialed, why? Why did I accept a position that offers 1/10 of my previous income? Kesha completed the query. Because it was not centered on monetary compensation, Gloria. It concerned fairness. She extracted a collection of papers from her attaché case. 6 months earlier, James, you terminated the employment of a staff member from your corporation due to perceived cultural incongruity. Do you recall Marcus Johnson? The African-American engineer who engineered your most recent residential development. James furrowed his brows, evidently ill at ease. Marcus, yes, there were certain complications. The complications arose because Gloria proposed to your human resources director that staff members such as him might not align with the Whitmore corporate identity. Kesha positioned a paper onto the surface of the table. An electronic mail message dated the 3rd of March. Distributed to 5 members of the executive board. Gloria's complexion became pallid. How do you possess entry to confidential company emails? Because Marcus Johnson is my younger male sibling. The disclosure impacted the chamber akin to an explosive device. And when he recounted to me the methodical discrimination he endured here, I determined to personally examine the familial surroundings that fostered this particular kind of professional mindset. James settled heavily into an upholstered chair, absorbing the details. His housekeeper, in whom he had placed his confidence for 15 years, had actively meddled in commercial judgments based on racial bias. And the female individual who was revolutionizing his daughter's existences was the sister of the male whom he had unjustly dismissed. Marcus became jobless 2 days before the arrival of his 3rd offspring, Kesha continued, her vocal tone acquiring a measured intensity. He remained without employment for a duration of 4 months, nearly forfeited his dwelling, and his spouse endured postpartum despondency without adequate medical care because they lacked health coverage. I was unaware, James uttered, genuinely astonished. Naturally you were not. Gloria ensured you would never discover. Kesha directed her attention towards the housekeeper. Because individuals such as yourself function covertly, disseminating toxic suggestions into the auditory organs of those possessing authority to make choices, sowing uncertainty regarding the proficiency of persons you deem inappropriate. Gloria attempted one final, desperate maneuver. Mr. James, she is present to inflict harm upon us. It is a scheme. She orchestrated all of this. You are correct, Gloria. I did orchestrate it all, Kesha smiled. However, there was an element of peril inherent in that smile. But not to inflict injury upon anyone. I planned it to reveal the reality of how preconceived notions function within households like this, how they pervade every aspect, from domestic judgments to corporate mandates. She retrieved her phone and presented him with a sequence of textual communications. All of our verbal exchanges throughout the preceding 21 days have been preserved with lawful authorization. I notified you on my inaugural day that I would be meticulously chronicling my professional activities. Every ethnically biased remark, every endeavor at subversion, every instance you attempted to meddle in my interaction with the children. James observed Gloria's complete collapse before his gaze. The woman he had revered as an essential support of his residence had been systematically exposed as an individual whose actions stemmed from profound and perilous biases. The twin children are slumbering because they at last have an individual who comprehends childhood trauma attending to them, Kesha explained. Not because they are being administered medicinal substances, but because they are receiving therapeutic intervention from a competent specialist who discerns the indications of unresolved sorrow in young offspring. She closed the portfolio and fixed her gaze directly upon James. The inquiry now stands. What will you undertake with this acquired knowledge? Will you persist in permitting individuals like Gloria to sway your judgments concerning your staff and concerning your own offspring? At that precise instant, Ruby and Rose rushed through the entrance, their facial complexions flushed from their recreational activities. Daddy, Kesha, we located a bird's dwelling within the oak foliage. The children's luminous artlessness presented a stark opposition to the palpable strain in the surrounding atmosphere. Kesha bent down to welcome them, and James observed as his daughters adhered to her with an assurance that had necessitated several months to cultivate with any grown-up following their mother's passing. For a fleeting instant, as he witnessed the tableau, his daughters at last experiencing contentment, the housekeeper he had placed his reliance upon exposed as biased, and the female who had rescued his household disclosing herself as an individual pursuing equity for her own male sibling, James comprehended he was situated at the core of an instruction regarding how influence and authority can be employed both to sustain inequity and to rectify it. However, what neither James nor Gloria yet comprehended was that Kesha had chronicled significantly more than just verbal exchanges and electronic communiques. She had unearthed linkages between Gloria's household bias and Whitmore's corporate methodologies that extended considerably beyond her brother's specific instance. These connections, once brought to light, would not only ruin a professional career but potentially reformulate the collective perspective of the city's entire business aristocracy concerning societal accountability and the repercussions of their preconceived notions. The twins' entrance briefly alleviated the strain, yet Kesha recognized that this was precisely the opportune moment she had awaited for weeks. Ruby stood up, asking, "How about presenting to Father and Gloria the illustration you created yesterday depicting our nightly habits?" The girls rushed enthusiastically to retrieve their artworks, leaving the trio of grown-ups in a profound quietude. Gloria seized the opportune moment to attempt one final, urgent assault. "Mr. James, she is even influencing the children." "This serves as undeniable evidence that—" "Gloria," Kesha gently interjected, acquiring her digital tablet, "are you certain you wish to proceed? Because we still possess 15 minutes of recorded material from Ruby's birthday celebration last month, when you conveyed to Mrs. Henderson that individuals resembling myself ought not to have contact with offspring from conventional households." Gloria's facial coloration transitioned from flushed to a pallor indicative of extreme fear. The birthday festivity had constituted a significant social gathering attended by no less than 20 prominent families. If those recorded segments were to become public, "I also possess your communications to the exclusive executive Nanny's online group," Kesha persisted, navigating through the display where you had disseminated images of me without permission, speculating about my genuine objectives concerning the household. James drew nearer, accepting the digital tablet from Kesha's grasp. His facial characteristics grew rigid as he perused the written communications. "Gloria, you disseminated photographic images of my daughter's childcare provider to unfamiliar individuals, discussing our intimate domestic existence. Mr. James, I was merely exercising prudence." "Prudence?" James's vocal tone ascended an octave. "You breached my family's right to privacy, propagated confidential data, and even possessed the temerity to meddle in my commercial judgments founded upon racial bias." Kesha observed the interaction with restrained contentment. She had meticulously orchestrated each disclosure, understanding that James's self-regard as a paternal figure and an entrepreneur would serve as the most potent instrument against Gloria's detrimental sway. "But there is additional information," she declared, activating another data directory on her portable device. "Gloria, do you recall advocating for the termination of 3 African-American staff members from Whitmore within the preceding 2 years? Always citing apparently technical justifications." The quietude was profound. James gazed at his housekeeper as if encountering her for the very first time. Jennifer Watson, a financial analytical professional, discharged after Gloria implied that individuals such as her might not align with the corporation's conventional business ethos. David Miller, an architectural designer, reassigned to the division with the least prestige after Gloria expressed her reservations regarding his appropriateness for the client demographic. "And my sibling Marcus, naturally. How do you possess entry to this proprietary data?" James questioned, genuinely bewildered. "Because subsequent to Marcus's dismissal, I commenced a methodical inquiry into the patterns of termination within your enterprise. I ascertained that Gloria maintained consistent communication with 5 individuals within your human resources department, perpetually furnishing insights concerning staff members derived from observations she made during social gatherings and familial assemblies." Kesha presented him with an elaborate tabulated document. Over the course of the past 3 years, 16 employees of Black or Latino heritage have been either terminated or demoted from Whitmore Industries. In 60% of these instances, an electronic mail or telephone call originating from Gloria was present within the records, invariably proposing issues of cultural compatibility or questions concerning suitability for the organizational setting. James sank heavily into a seat, running his hands through his hair. My heavens, Gloria, is this accurate? The housekeeper finally succumbed. I merely wish to safeguard the family's standing. Individuals like her fail to comprehend our principles, our heritage, our ideals. James erupted. Which principles are those? Bias, preconception, obliterating the livelihoods of capable individuals founded upon the hue of their epidermis. At that instant, Ruby and Rose returned, hurrying with their artistic creations. Look, it's Kesha reciting a narrative to us, exclaimed Rose, displaying a vibrantly colored illustration of an African-American female seated amidst two children, all exhibiting smiles. And here she is instructing us concerning the celestial bodies, added Ruby, presenting another drawing where Kesha indicated a star-filled firmament while the girls gazed upwards in amazement. The guilelessness of the artworks stood in stark and brutal contrast to the venomous reality that had been unveiled within the chamber. James observed his offspring, finally experiencing joy, at last slumbering soundly, ultimately self-assured, and grasped the profound scale of the inequity he had permitted to thrive beneath his own domicile. Gloria, he stated, his vocal tone now restrained yet unyielding. You are dismissed. I desire your departure from this residence today. Mr. James, I implore you. 15 years of dedication. 15 years impacting my choices with bias, he corrected. 15 years undermining proficient staff. 15 years contaminating the milieu of my dwelling and my corporation. Kesha retrieved one final portfolio from her assorted items. James, there remains one additional piece of information you ought to be aware of. Gloria did not solely influence terminations. She also obstructed new engagements. She presented him with a collection of curriculum vitae. 23 exceedingly competent applicants were declined over the preceding 2 years subsequent to Gloria conducting informal inquiries into their familial origins and personal histories. Among these were 2 engineering professionals holding academic credentials from MIT, an acclaimed architectural designer, and an analytical expert possessing an MBA from Harvard. All of African American or Latino descent, James remarked, surveying the resumes. Professionals who could have contributed substantially to the corporation. Precisely. Meanwhile, less qualified contenders who aligned with Gloria's preferred profile were engaged at elevated remunerations and in more advantageous capacities. Gloria made a final desperate attempt. Mr. James, she orchestrated this entire situation. It constitutes a conspiracy against my person. A conspiracy? Kesha chuckled softly. Gloria, it would indeed be a conspiracy had I fabricated your expressions, counterfeited your electronic mails, or invented your digital messages. All that I did was meticulously document and systematically arrange your very own activities. James turned towards his daughters, who were observing the tension among the grown-ups with bewilderment. Girls, how would you feel about proceeding to the garden while the grown-ups conclude their discussion? When the young ones departed, he confronted Gloria for a final occasion. You possess 1 hour to gather your belongings. I do not desire to perceive your presence on this estate again. What about the corporate entity? Kesha inquired. James drew a profound breath. By tomorrow's dawn, I shall initiate a thorough examination of the recruitment and termination procedures spanning the preceding 3 years. All personnel who have been adversely affected will be contacted with propositions for either re-employment or financial redress. Gloria tottered out of the chamber, utterly vanquished. 15 years of influence and authority had collapsed in under 60 minutes in the face of her own substantiated evidence of biased behavior. Kesha observed the housekeeper's departure, experiencing a profound yet restrained contentment. It was not malevolence. It was unadulterated fairness administered with meticulous exactitude. Why? James asked once they were by themselves. Why undertake all this effort? To arrive here, to attend to my offspring, to confront all this prejudice merely to unmask Gloria? Because unaddressed inequity is perpetuated inequity, Kesha responded straightforwardly. And because Ruby and Rose merit growing up in a setting where proficiency holds greater significance than epidermal pigmentation. However, there remained one ultimate disclosure of which neither James nor Gloria were yet cognizant. A finding Kesha had uncovered regarding the authentic linkages between Gloria's household bias and a significantly broader system of methodical exclusion that permeated the entirety of the city's commercial aristocracy. And that was on the verge of transforming not merely a single household, but an entire corporate ethos founded upon unchallenged prerogative. 6 months subsequent, the alteration in the Whitmore twin siblings' existences constituted merely a minor component of a considerably more expansive upheaval that Kesha had subtly orchestrated. Marcus Johnson occupied his newly assigned workspace at Whitmore Industries, presently serving as the head of sustainable expansion, a role specifically instituted to utilize his proficiency in housing initiatives designed for inclusivity. His remuneration was 40% greater than his prior earnings, and he had acquired an ownership interest in the corporation as recompense for his period of joblessness. I still struggle to believe my female sibling accomplished all of this, he communicated to James during one of their recurring weekly discussions, which now encompassed deliberations concerning organizational heterogeneity. She meticulously devised every action for numerous months. James offered a smile, gazing through the window at the recently established communal garden the corporation had developed on the adjacent unoccupied parcel of land, an undertaking spearheaded by 3 of the staff members who had been re-engaged following the comprehensive examination. Your female sibling not only rescued my daughters, she also preserved my enterprise from becoming irrelevant in a global environment that no longer condones methodical bias. The thorough examination had unveiled a pattern even more widespread than James had envisioned. 23 personnel were either reinstated to their positions or financially compensated in an appropriate manner. 5 managerial staff who had actively engaged in the discriminatory behaviors were terminated from their employment. The corporate entity instituted a novel recruitment procedure known as blind hiring, wherein curriculum vitae were assessed without inclusion of photographic images or given names that might disclose ethnic lineage. Gloria, for her part, ascertained that 15 years of exerting influence predicated on preconceived notions did not forge a robust professional support system. Not one of the prominent households re-employed her. After Kesha's audio recordings were circulated discreetly within the online social groups for childcare providers, she was subsequently employed at a chain of hotels, receiving less than 50% of the remuneration she had earned at the Whitmore Manor. The most remarkable aspect, James continued, is that she never desired to ruin anyone. Her objective was to alter the existing framework. Kesha had politely refused James's proposal to serve as a perpetual advisor for the corporate entity. Instead, she utilized her officially recorded expertise to establish a consultancy business specializing in pinpointing and rectifying systemic partiality. Her inaugural client was a network of medical facilities in Detroit confronting legal actions concerning racial bias in the provision of patient services. Ruby and Rose, now aged 5, attended a school with greater diversity, which James had specifically selected to broaden their perspectives. Kesha continued to visit them biannually, no longer in the capacity of a childcare provider, but as Aunt Kesha, the female who had converted terrifying nocturnal experiences into tranquil slumber and instructed them that familial bonds are constructed upon affection, not upon prejudice. "Father, will Aunt Kesha be attending my birthday celebration?" Rose inquired during the morning meal, adorned with the celestial body necklace she never removed. "Certainly, my dear." "And your Uncle Marcus as well," James responded, still astonished by how inherently natural it felt to refer to Kesha's brother as part of his kin. The genuine gauge of Kesha's accomplishments was not found in the remarkable statistics of her advisory enterprise nor in the 23 staff members she had aided in securing re-employment at Whitmore Industries. It was rather in the telephone conversation she received the preceding week from a youthful African-American mother residing in Chicago who had viewed her televised discussion on a podcast focused on societal equity. My 6-year-old male child is experiencing unfair treatment at his educational institution, the woman communicated. The instructor states he is problematic, but I am aware he possesses intellect. Could you assist me in systematically recording what is transpiring? Kesha smiled, acquiring a fresh writing pad. Let us commence from the outset. Relate to me every detail you have observed, because the most effective retribution is not eradicating those who caused you harm. It involves constructing pathways where barriers once existed, generating prospects where there was marginalization, and converting suffering into meaningful objective. James Whitmore assimilated the lesson that an advantageous position devoid of understanding constitutes a perilous instrument. However, an advantageous position coupled with meaningful intent possesses the capacity to entirely rescribe historical narratives. Gloria endeavored to wield preconceived notions as authority, yet ascertained that animosity invariably constructs structures of sand. Kesha employed intellect as a means of rectifying wrongs and established an enduring heritage that will persist for successive generations. Should this account of metamorphosis achieved through bravery resonate deeply within your spirit, subscribe to the online platform because occasionally, altering the global landscape commences with a singular individual sufficiently courageous to chronicle the truth and adequately strategic to apply it with meticulous accuracy.